Welcome, everyone. It is Thursday, August 6th, 2020, and my name is Danielle Lazier, and I'm here for this next installment of our online Zoom webinars and workshops on all things San Francisco Bay Area related real estate. And this month, we are talking about the home buying process. And so I've been doing this almost 20 years now here in San Francisco, and I was given this adage by an early manager. And the question was, when's the best time to buy a home in San Francisco? And the answer is 10 years ago. So what is the second best time to buy a home in San Francisco? You got it, today. And so even though you may try to want to time the market and you may be able to get into the right general vicinity of time or bands of time, you're never going to know if you timed it right until years later. And then frankly, it's going to be more luck and circumstance than anything else. So my best advice has always been, and I started my business working with a lot of first-time buyers. I wrote a blog early days in the early 2000s called SF Hot List, and I worked with a lot of first-time buyers. And my best advice is still and was, buy when you are ready to buy. And buy the best home that you can afford in the best location that you can afford as soon as you can afford it, instead of worrying so much about timing the market perfectly. Because you're lucky enough to be buying in a city like San Francisco, where there is a very small amount of land here, very limited amount of land, and a lot of reasons within driving distance that people want to be here over the long term, even if part of the people want to be in Truckee right now. San Francisco is a limited supply, high demand place to be in the world. So the best home may not be a home that's in perfect condition. It might be a home that needs work, and we'll get into that. But you do want to be thinking about resale when you're buying as well. So you get into the best home that you can afford in the best neighborhood that you can afford, and one that you can imagine yourself living in for 3 to 5 years or more. And if you do all those things, you know, you'll probably be in pretty good shape. So what we're facing right now in the market is a lot of conflicting markets and a lot of conflicting data. We've seen tremendous increase in inventory in the aggregate overall in both single family and condo. However, there are still listings that are selling very quickly and with competition and multiple offers. And so we are also dealing with a lot of people in San Francisco who, you know, aren't going to just give their homes away because there's a pandemic, you know. So you will have, just because it's more of a buyer's market than it's been in the last 10 years, doesn't mean it's a free-for-all. And it doesn't mean that it's cheap here. It's still very expensive. And it's still a competitive place to buy. Because we just don't have a lot of inventory here at all. We just don't have a lot of housing here at all. So that's kind of my introduction. The way I'm going to do this is a Q&A with our esteemed expert panelists. So welcome, Eve. It's good to have you here.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
We are also neighbors, so we are Zooming from just a few doors away. Why don't you introduce yourself, your quick elevator pitch resume?
Sure. So I work exclusively with buyers, which I think is a real value add. I'm a mom of 2. I live in Noe Valley. The kids go to public school, so that's always sort of an interesting, you know, perspective that I can give to clients and friends as well. And, you know, I think that's about it. I love being in real estate. It's like the best job I've ever had. My job is to sell San Francisco, which to me is pretty easy. I think it's the most beautiful city in the world. Not without its challenges, but I'm always like, if you can buy in San Francisco, you should buy in San Francisco.
You are very enthusiastic about the city and the work, which is super important in such a tough business and tough market. So, okay, one of the most common questions that you get asked is, what is the process of buying a home? Like, what are the first steps?
Right. I mean, people will be doing their Zillow searches and their Redfin searches, and then they'll kind of hit a wall and say, okay, we can't go further. What do we do next? And so I see it as sort of a tandem thing. You're getting your team together. And so that means you're finding a good agent. And then hopefully either from your bank, you can get a referral sometimes, but also the agent should have a good lender referral. And just like what Mickey was saying, we all have our back of the envelope calculations on what we can afford. But until you speak to a bank, you don't really know. And I
Mhm.
think we can all agree that it's helpful to know what you can spend before you start looking seriously.
Okay.
Really about keep getting that team together so you can start looking in a focused way.
Okay. So you're shopping online. That's usually what people start doing first.
Right.
You're kind of looking around, you're poking around, you're looking at stuff. In the old days, maybe you'd go to some open houses.
Mm-hmm.
And then at some point you would say, all right, I want to get serious about that. And the first step is to put your team together with your loan approval and your realtor. And it sounds like you're saying that a good place to get your loan recommendation is from your agent. And
Mm-hmm.
why is that? Why
A,
shouldn't I
a
call,
local
1-800 home loans?
Right. I know. And a lot of people start there, which can be a good first step. But a local lender is a lot more important than people think. For one thing, the local lender knows what sort of pitfalls can come up during a process. They know that this certain condo building needs extra approval because it's more than X percentage of commercial. Or they know that in our market, 30 days escrow is competitive. I've spoken to clients who have lenders in New York, and they say, we can get it done in 60 days. And I say, well, that's great, but I would never get an offer accepted if I had a 60-day escrow.
So it
So
helps to get your offer accepted to have a local lender.
yes, I would definitely agree. Also, a lot of listing agents will call the lender to assess the buyer's qualifications. And if it's a local lender, they may have already worked with them. They know it's going to be an easy process. You're a listing agent, you know that all listing agents care is that escrow is going to be successful, quick, and it's going to close in a timely fashion. And that's where a local lender can really help.
And do you have a financial benefit if your clients use a specific lender?
No, definitely not. I mean, that's probably against the law, right?
Probably. But so it's more about the fact that they understand the rhythm and the beat of the local market, and that they have name recognition and brand recognition with the agents in the local market. So they're kind of like a verified entity. And they know more about the types of products, and meaning the types of homes that we're selling and the kind of quirks that we have to deal with here that you might not have in Des Moines.
Right. I mean, things that would maybe fluster an out-of-state lender, like a brick foundation, are de rigueur for lenders here.
Okay.
And then there's some products like tenancy in common that only San Francisco / Marin banks will lend on at all. So
Yeah.
some products necessitate a local lender.
Okay. And so how long does it take to buy a home?
It really depends on you. If you're ready, emotionally, psychologically, and financially, we could go out and find the right home for you tomorrow. I always joke that I don't want clients to find that perfect home as the first one, because it can take a while to get acclimated to the process and to be emotionally ready to pull the trigger, as it were. So it really depends on the buyer. And sometimes we have clients who say, I'm having a baby in 6 weeks and I need to be moved in by then. And so there are some hard timelines sometimes, but most of the time it's emotionally and psychologically and financially.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And I love that point about not wanting to find your dream home the first one. And it's not because you can't buy it.
Right.
If you've done your homework and you've done your pre-approval and you're ready, it's because your brain is going to tell you, I couldn't possibly write an offer on the first property that I've seen.
Right.
And so you can end up sometimes letting the best one get away because you have some sort of rule in your head that you need to see, or mom and dad back home have said, well, you can't buy it on that first offer. You need to go see 50 properties. And what they
Exactly.
don't know is that seeing 50 properties that fit your criteria in San Francisco might take you 5 years.
Yeah, yeah, it could.
Okay. And so, okay, my question to you here is, we are in COVID, rules have changed.
Mm-hmm.
How do you shop for a home right now?
Right, right. So it's not as hard as you might think. We require certain entry documents. We require, that's from the listing agents and the state and the city as well. Some listing agents require pre-approval letters because it is sort of a burden for the listing agents to show properties with sanitation requirements, etc. Even more reason to get a lender lined up as early as possible. And also a review of all the online materials. So basically, what we're asking, what agents are asking, is that you be a little bit more serious about the home than in the non-COVID period, when you could just walk into the open house. Paradoxically, I think it can be helpful because you're not going to waste your time on a home that you know has a deal breaker straight away. You're going to sit down and think about it first. You know, do I really want a house with no backyard? Do I really want a condo in a 47 unit building? And you're not just going to say, well, let's see it. You're going to really think about it before you go out
Okay.
and take a look. And,
Okay.
and also because of COVID, sometimes the lead times for escrow are a little bit longer. I think those are the biggest impacts on buyers.
Okay. And so it's hard to tell sometimes from online what's really going on. Is that something that the agent can help with?
Yes. I always tell my buyers, I say, if you find a steal on the internet, call me. And you'll say, it's a 4-bedroom for $1 million. That's when I do a little bit of that research. I call the agent, I say, hey, what's going on? Why has this been on the market so long? You know, what's the deal? And a lot of times, actually, I spoke to an agent, I called them, and I said, my client's interested in this property. And they said, look, I don't want to waste anyone's time. The living room is tiny. You can't tell from the pictures, but it's the tiniest living room you ever saw. And I called my clients and I said, you're probably not interested anymore. It's the tiniest living room you ever saw. And they said, yep, you're right. We don't need to see it. So it can be really helpful to get some of that background information. You know, is it tenant occupied? One house was listed as single family, but it was actually a duplex. So great. We didn't have to go see it. They didn't want a duplex.
Yeah.
So doing that background research can save the consumer a lot of time.
And keep everyone at home and safe if they don't need to be out there. And, you know, is it wrong to say that agents will tell other agents more things than they will tell the buyer directly?
That's entirely correct. People say, well, why can't I just call the listing agent? Well, you know, I've worked with a lot of these listing agents. We have a professional relationship, and they're definitely going to be more forthcoming than if it was a consumer that called them.
Okay. So what is a, you know, just to simplify it, what does a buyer agent do?
So a buyer agent does a lot more than identify the houses for your potential purchase, because that is the internet's job in a lot of ways now. But a buyer's agent can show you some off-market properties if they're coming soon, say through the multiple listing service or through Compass. Can do a lot of that research for you to save your time. Can try to look at, you know, identify what your priorities are, and maybe, I don't want to say push your boundaries, but expose you to properties that you might not have originally thought would work for you. And then say, you know, this, I think this really fits kind of the heart of what you're looking for, the spirit of what you're looking for. And then, of course, doing the negotiation. So finding out from the listing agent, what is their seller's priorities? Do they need a quick close? Is it just about the money for them? Will a personal letter help? Just those little things that can help an offer be accepted. And then guiding the escrow process. So I'm basically like an air traffic controller, emailing a ton of different people at all times, because you're too busy. The buyer's too busy to be talking to their lender every day or talking to escrow. That's not their job. You know, oh, did the CD go out? That's my job. So that you're just signing DocuSigns and sending in money, and then you're getting your keys. That's kind of the goal. You're not worrying the whole time. You know,
well, you'll probably still be worrying.
Yes, to be
And
fair,
then Nikki will call you and say, I need another pay stub.
Right. Oh my God, that's at least I can be like calling every day. Hey, we're still on track. I know you're freaking out, but try not to as much.
Yeah. And you would also, would you disagree that because from your vantage point, you see a lot of property and not just the one that the person wants to buy or what they see?
Yeah.
Do you ever point out the negatives that someone might not be thinking of?
Yeah, I definitely do. I'm trying to think of an example, but there's some things where I'll say, you said that you need room for your mother-in-law, but there's only one shared bathroom on this floor, and the second bathroom is down these really steep stairs. Can she get down these steep stairs? Because it's a very emotional purchase. And so I like to think I'm kind of in the background, saying, is this kind of really what you wanted? Not doubting people, but making sure that we land on a place that fits what their actual needs are.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
What do you want, like, what would you want buyers to know?
I think my most important thing is that you should feel listened to. And I think that that's sort of an important sales lesson for any sort of person in sales. It's very easy, and in fact, real estate agents have this reputation for being very pushy or not listening. And it's your process, and it's probably the biggest purchase you'll make in your whole life, unless you're going to purchase a yacht or something, or an island. And so
An island, yeah.
an island, right? A lot of my buyers' second homes are islands. But it's something you need to listen. And I've had clients or prospects say, look, I'm not going to buy in a year. Is that okay with you? Yeah, it's your timeline. I'm not going to be like, buy in the next 6 weeks or we're done. You need to be able to understand that your agent knows your timeline, knows what your priorities are, knows what your challenges are, and you're feeling like they're helping you, that they're not dragging you to the finish line.
Okay.
Yeah, that's really important to me. Whether someone works for me or not, I just say, please find someone who will actually listen to you.
And I would joke that you want someone, typical agents are very pushy, which you don't
Mm-hmm.
want, but you also do want someone who's a little bit gonna push
Yeah,
when it's necessary,
yeah,
and who's, not afraid to tell you the unvarnished truth.
right. Right. I mean, there's some houses that present beautifully, and I'll look around and I'll say, guys, this is kind of a poorly done flip, in my opinion.
Right.
If you look here around the light switch, you can see this, and you can see that the front, they didn't even bother scraping the paint. They just slapped it on top. Little things like that.
And
Where,
also just when it's, like, is it wrong to say that when you're figuring out in a competitive situation, what to offer on a property,
mm-hmm,
that you want your agent to, you may have an idea in your head of what you think something's worth.
yeah.
And you want your agent to tell you what they think,
Mm-hmm,
and be honest about it.
right. I've been really lucky. San Francisco buyers are really savvy. So no one is generally horrified when I say, would it be crazy to think this is going to go for 20% over? No one is like, that's shocking to me. But it is hard to say that number sometimes. Hey, look, I've talked to the agent. This is the number. This is, they even got a preemptive at 1.3. And so this is what it's going to be at. It can be hard, but it's important. No one wants to lose because the agent couldn't tell you the hard truth.
Very good point. And we have had a lot of clients over the years who had fired their first agent because they were too nice, and
Right.
we're not telling them what it would take to actually win.
Right.
Because you fall in love, you go and you look and you look and you finally found something, and then you don't get it. It's hard. And you find out later you could have gotten it for not too much more.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I think, when you and I work together, that's one of the things that continually comes up in these situations,
Mm-hmm.
is that whoever you work with, you want an agent who gets the information from the other side.
Right.
And the agents who get the information from the other side tend to be those of us who do the business, who have a good reputation and have a reputation of getting things done,
Right.
because that's who the other agents want to talk to.
Right.
So I have one last question for you, to kind of help demystify this process a little more for folks. How do you get paid?
Oh, that's a great, I love when people say that. So I get paid via commission, and the seller pays the commission for both the listing agent and the buyer's agent or the selling agent. And so that comes from the seller. Of course, it's sort of baked into that purchase. But the other question, if I can add on, is people
Yeah.
say, well, so why don't you recommend that I pay, you know, if you're recommending I'm paying 200 over list price, well, that just lines your pockets, right? And my answer is, look, you know, in the end of the day, like 200,000 over is 2 or 3,000 to me. I'd have to do the math. Is it really worth it for me to ruin a future relationship? Because people talk, they're going to find out, oh, you bought your house for that amount, or you bought your condo for that amount. People look at comps in San Francisco. Again, consumers are savvy. So they know what they should have paid. And am I going to lose a whole future with these people? Not to mention it's unethical. Over $2,000, you know, 1,000, it's never worth it. And I want my buyers to be happy. It's actually sort of a problem how much I want my buyers to be happy. And to feel like they just, you know, if not a bargain, because it's San Francisco, that they got a good house for a price that they were happy with.
Yeah, that's great. That was that makes total sense to me. Like the reputation, if you want to quantify it for folks out there, you're going to make a lot more money over the long run by having a good reputation with your clients and getting referrals from them and repeat business than from trying to get some sort of incremental difference on the commission in the short run.
Right. I'm not looking to just like get a couple extra thousand and then peel out of town.
Right. So there's a question from the audience, and then we'll move on to Gisela about how our team works. And so on our team, there are 3 of us who sell, and it's you and me and Josh. And your role is to work exclusively with buyers. And I primarily work with sellers. However, I have a lot of the relationships, and I know a lot of our clients. And so you and I work very closely together. You know, I'm CC'd on all the emails. We talk through strategy together, and we help each other out when necessary. But it's a team effort, but you also have a primary contact, and you have Eve is your boots on the ground helping you get the home. What would you add anything to explain?
I don't think so. I mean, it's just great, you know, because you've been in the business so long. So I say I'm Eve Fisher with Danielle Lazier, and people go, oh my God, Danielle, I love her.
Not all of them say that.
That was helpful.
I'm the Velvet Hammer. They don't all say that.
How about, oh, Danielle, we really respect her.
There you go. There you go. Okay. Well, it's been awesome having you, and thank you. So stay put in case there's more later. And now let's move on to Gisela Schmal, who is an architect here in San Francisco. And I will add that I have worked with her personally, and she has worked with many of our team clients over the years as well. And so when I was thinking about who to bring into this workshop, you know, one of the things that people often want to know is like, what can I do to my home? And should I even look for something where I could do some updates and not? And that made me think, you know, I think Gisela is a great person to bring in. So welcome.
Thank you, Danielle.
So same question to you, quick elevator pitch resume.
Okay, I've been a designer for over 30 years, and my first career was as a product designer. So electronic products, mostly computers, things like that. And then in 2005, I went to UC Berkeley and got a master's in architecture, and I've been doing residential architecture ever since. And about 5 years ago, I started my own firm.
Okay, great. So here's my question. what are the two most common and successful types of remodeling projects for the owner occupier home purchaser here in San Francisco?
Okay, the two that I do the most are I either excavate down to add more square footage below an existing house, or I do an attic conversion. And the reason those two are the most common is that they don't involve neighbor input. And in the pre-COVID days, they were typically over-the-counter permits. Excavating down would be maybe a little bit longer, but they were pretty quick permits to obtain, as opposed to doing a bigger volumetric expansion to a house. That would be a year-long permit process. So this one's easy, quick, and we add extra square footage and increase the property value.
Okay, so either going down into typical like behind a garage kind of space.
Yeah, or often we have basements that the ceiling heights aren't code legal for occupiable space. You can use it as a garage or storage, but to live in that space, they're not the minimum ceiling height of 7'6". So then we excavate down, and that's often a great thing to do because our houses have foundations of brick, which aren't great in an earthquake. So excavating down does two things for you at the same time. They give you more square footage, plus they replace an old foundation and make your house safer. And in terms of the attic conversion, the planning code has an exception where it would allow you to add 8-foot by 8-foot dormers to an attic space. So if you have an attic with a gabled ceiling like this, if I add a dormer, I make the low part much more habitable. And the 8-foot dormer will be approved over the counter by the planning department, and it doesn't go through neighborhood notification. So I do that a lot.
Okay, you see, so for those of you listening, if you've gone to houses in Bernal Heights, you see a lot of these in the smaller peaked roof Victorians, not just in Bernal, throughout the city, but there's a lot there where dormers have been put in. Some better than others, but that is a common project that we've seen here. Okay, and so what role does the architect play in the process of remodeling your home? And like, when do you engage the architect?
Well, the architect really should be the first person you engage. My engineer calls me the quarterback. Not only do I do the design, but I assemble the whole team. I herd the cats. Like, I make everything happen. Engaging a contractor early is a mistake. Well, it's worth talking to a contractor early, but until the design is done, the contractor's just guessing when they're estimating costs for you. So really, architects should come on board early. We can tell you what's possible in this town. There's a lot of planning code that we have to know, and there's a lot of limitations about what you can do. So you need to get us on board first, and then we will assemble the entire team and make it all happen for you.
Do you get involved in projects that aren't adding square footage, but are doing all the surfaces, kitchen, baths?
Yeah, that's a very common project, especially here in San Francisco with all these tiny Victorians where the rooms are really small. So I was listening to Eve talk about the tiny little living room, and from my standpoint, I'm like, no problem. I'll just tear down a wall, and make it bigger. So I'm doing a lot of remodels, and I think that can add a lot of value to a house.
Okay.
Something with a strange kitchen, strange floor plan, and we can improve that. And that's also, again, in pre-COVID days and over-the-counter permits, so something that can happen pretty quickly.
Is that still over the counter? That hasn't changed.
It's still technically over the counter. The thing that's changed with shelter in place is that the building department is no longer open for me to go in and sit down and visit the various different departments and get the permit. Now you have to make an appointment online, and it's taking months to get the appointment to come in, drop off the drawings in the morning, and then at the end of the day, you're supposed to come back and pick them up. So it has slowed down the process, just like with everything.
Yeah.
It's slowed down a lot. The building department they're working from home most days, and they're only in 1 day a week. That's what I heard most recently. So things are moving slowly.
Is it wrong to say that with the tariffs, et cetera, that the costs of remodeling here have gone up?
Materials? I think yes, it's gone up, but material costs have never been the big cost in terms of construction. Labor has always driven construction costs more than materials. And labor is still very expensive in San Francisco. So that's what's driving costs more than material prices.
And that's probably been affected by all of the fires, regional fires.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah. With the fires and all the construction that was happening, labor costs went up. I just recently heard a story from a contractor that one of his best carpenters was stolen by another contractor. The other contractor offered a $5,000 bonus for the carpenter to leave. So,
Okay.
and it's very hard to find really good skilled labor here.
Yes. So they're poaching not just nannies
Yes.
now, they're poaching carpenters too. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, so from you and I may have to agree to disagree on this next one, but from your vantage point as an architect, what do you think about SF home buying, and what would you do as a buyer?
So yeah, we're going to disagree. Buy a fixer. I would, if it was up to me, I would always buy a fixer upper. And there's two reasons for that. First, when you buy a fixer upper, you get to design the house that you want and not that somebody else wanted. The other thing is you know what you're getting in terms of construction. If you buy something that's already fixed up, as Eve alluded to, you might be getting a developer done property and they're incentivized to reduce costs. So they're going to use the cheapest contractor possible. And you don't know what kind of problems you're going to be inheriting, 5 years down the road, the roof leaks because they didn't do the waterproofing correctly. So I would always say buy a fixer, ideally buy a fixer without major structural issues. And that's where an architect can help you out, or a structural engineer can help you out assessing that. But I would always buy a fixer because then I know what the quality of the work is going to be like when it gets done, because I'm going to pick the contractor.
Right. And to clarify, a fixer could mean something, could be a condo with dated kitchens and baths and old carpeting.
Yep, my flat had a Home Depot kitchen, and I tore that out and made it beautiful on a modest budget too.
Okay, that makes sense. A lot of it makes sense, and I don't disagree with that. I would just add that it's important to also think about your lifestyle and your time tolerance, and that with money as cheap as it is, for some folks, spending more to get a finished place is the better play, as long as they are choosing something that was done well and suits their needs.
Yeah.
So,
well, additionally, also, I think it's a certain type of person who's willing to do a fixer. Even though I try to make the process as easy as possible, it still takes a lot of time and mental energy to do it. And so not everyone's up to that. And typically with a fixer, if it's a significant remodel or addition, I'm going to advise you to move out. So there's that headache also. So it's not simple, but in the end, you will get a better result, guaranteed. It'll be worth it. It always is.
So when you hear those stories, people who have had the nightmare remodeling situation, or they're in over their head, bitten off more than they can chew, where did they go wrong?
Oh, usually it's time and money. They underestimated how much time it would take, how much money it would take. That's the biggest problem I have with clients, is they just don't budget enough money. The other issue is that they assume they can do whatever they want in San Francisco, and San Francisco has planning codes that limits what we can do in terms of changing the exterior facade, particularly the front facade, or doing additions. You just can't do whatever you want. You can't just buy a very old rundown house and tear it down and build new. So it's really important to get an architect on board pretty early, especially if you're thinking about doing a remodel or addition, especially if you're going to do an addition.
Okay. Yeah. So it sounds like you're saying that a lot of times when we hear these nightmare stories, it's often that they didn't bring in the quarterback that knew what they were doing in our local market early enough.
Yeah. And I'm happy to help out, and most architects will come out and look at a listing with with a buyer,
Mhm.
and then we can give you a first read. And if we feel that, oh, we need to get an engineer on board, we'll recommend that too.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. So, last question to you is, what did we miss? Like, what is your best advice for people if you could, wave your magic wand?
Well, I have two things I want to say about that. First, the most important thing is besides hiring a good architect who's a really good fit for you, is also it's really important to hire a really good contractor, because they are the Sherpa that's going to take you up to the top of the mountain. They're going to execute the vision. And as Eve alluded to, this is probably the single biggest purchase you're going to make in your entire life. Why would you hire the cheapest contractor? It's really important to hire a really good contractor. A poor contractor can cause a lot of problems and cost you money down the road. But for me personally, it's very important that when I work with clients, that it's a really good fit for both of us. This is a long-term relationship we're going to have. Hardly anything gets built in under a year, and then there's design time in front of that. So we're looking at a 2 to 3 year relationship. So it's really important that we trust each other and can work as a team to basically solve problems when they come up, because there always will be problems in construction. But so trust is the big thing.
Okay. That was great. That was super interesting and helpful. We didn't miss anything, right?
No, it was the contractor issue. I really wanted to get that in because that's so important. The contract, I think the architect is key, but then the contractor, who you pick as a contractor, is so important, because a cheap contractor will do one of two things. They'll either do shoddy workmanship, and that will cost you money to fix, or they're going to hit you with 100 change orders, and so it'll cost more in the end. So it's really important that the contractor is adequately vetted, either through the architect, or the homeowner can do the vetting themselves too. Sometimes we'll both do it if it's a contractor that I'm not familiar with. The contractor is super important.
That's a very good segue to end on, because it brings us back to the beginning. It's a similar relationship between the realtor and the lender.
Mm-hmm.
When it's symbiotic, it works much better for the consumer.
Yep.
And they're both very vital. You could have a great agent, and if you have a bad lender who, they might be a nice person, but if they don't know how to do things in our market, and get things done, it's going to be a disaster for you and potentially cost you the house and a lot of money on the line in your deposit. So those two things, it's very similar what you were saying to what Eve was talking about with that relationship. And unless my guests have anything that they would like to add, now would be the time. I think we've covered what I was hoping to cover in this hour. And being respectful of the time. It's noon now, so perfect. Thank you everyone for joining us. So again, I'm Danielle Lazier here with Eve Fisher, and she and I work together. Eve is the buyer's agent, and Gisela Schmal is the architect here in San Francisco, and Nikki Congliandro is a mortgage lender here in San Francisco. Let's see, what else? Oh, one more thing. Sorry, guys. I'm going to go through you very quickly. Tell us how we can find you online if we have questions or want to talk to you about working together.
Me first?
I'll start with you.
Okay. Go to schmolldesign.com at CHMOLL design.com. You can also find me on Instagram, where I have projects under construction. That's probably the best place to find me.
Instagram?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And how about you, Eve?
Probably email eve@daniellelazier.com or text 415-535-0019.
Okay, awesome. Everyone have a wonderful afternoon, and stay safe, stay cozy. I hope the sun stays out a little bit longer this July, and I will see you all out there.
Thanks, Danielle.
All right.
Nice to see you all.
Bye.
Bye.